Hi, and welcome to the OT is In, the podcast where we merge the worlds of education and occupational therapy to empower families like yours. I'm Sarah Collins, your host, an occupational therapist and a homeschooling parent. I've experienced occupational therapy by supporting families for over 15 years, but also through seeking out support of my own children, so I'm right here in the trenches with you. Though there is not one way to educate your child, there is a lot to consider when individualizing an education. And the goal of this podcast is to explain some of the why behind what an occupational therapist is thinking so you can apply it to your own family. Especially with my three favorite topics: executive functioning, handwriting, and sensory processing. Each episode will be packed with practical tips, expert interviews, and real-life stories aimed at helping you to create a supportive learning environment for your child. So, grab your headphones and get ready to dive in of the collision of education and occupational therapy. I'm Sarah Collins from Homeschool OT, and I'm thrilled to have you with me on this journey of discovery. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the OT is In. This is the podcast where we talk all things occupational therapy, practical strategies, and how to better support our kids in real-world settings. I'm your host, Sarah Collins, and today we're diving into a topic that can, and I highlight the term here, can, shift the entire dynamic of how we support kids with social emotional challenges. The answer could be using declarative language. Now, I say can and could be because, as with any strategy or tip for communicating with our loved ones, there are pros and cons, which we're going to discuss today. We're going to define declarative language, give examples, hear the concerns from kids and adults who have had people change their language specifically for them, and talk about the concerns from parents who are worried about their children's futures if commands affect their ability to participate in what they need and will want to do. Ultimately, you know your child best. So I'm going to present different angles, and it's up to you to artfully apply this to your family. So grab your tea or your coffee and take me along on your drive or walk. And let's talk language and connection and compassion. Today's conversation is inspired by two wonderful resources: the Declarative Language Handbook by Linda Murphy and Communicating with Compassion by Bobbi Cook. Both are currently free if you have Kindle Unlimited, and both are essential reads if anyone looking to shift from directive, compliance-based approach to one that invites connection, problem solving, and self-reflection. So let's start with the basics of what is declarative language. So declarative language is the kind of communication that shares your thoughts and feelings or your observations. It's different from imperative language, which tells someone what to do. So for example, the imperative, put on your shoes, it's time to go. Declarative, it's time to get ready to leave. I'm going to put on my shoes. I wonder what you're going to do to get ready. Do you see the difference? So if you've studied English grammar alongside your elementary or middle school students, you're going to notice the subject change from the implied you, the one that you put in parentheses when you diagram the sentence. Then instead, this declarative language changes the subject to I wonder, I notice. Linda Murphy describes declarative language as a way of communicating that encourages flexible thinking, problem solving, and social awareness. It's used all the time in typical social interactions, especially by neurotypical kids and adults. But children with social learning differences don't often pick up on it naturally. And that's where we come in. Why does this declarative language matter? Let's think about the same child with social emotional challenges. Maybe they're autistic, maybe they have ADHD or anxiety. These kids are often navigating the world through a lens of heightened stress or of heightened confusion. They may feel constantly corrected, bossed around, misunderstood. Declarative language can lower the demand. It can reduce the pressure, and it can invite them alongside of you. When we say, I wonder if we need a break, instead of go take a break, we're modeling self-awareness, curiosity, and giving the child space to arrive at that decision themselves. In Communicating with Compassion, Bobbi Cook emphasizes that language is a relational tool. She says it's not just a delivery system for commands. Compassionate communication allows space for this connection and shared experience, which is exactly what declarative language fosters. So, what could this sound like? Well, let me give you a few examples from Linda Murphy's work. She says, I notice your hands are in fists. I'm wondering if your body is feeling tense. See the I notice and I wonder. Or I'm trying to remember what we do when the timer goes off. Again, the I is the subject. Or it looks like you might be getting frustrated. Or it looks like you might be feeling XYZ. Now, also, let me give you an example from this new picture book, A Chameleon Tale. It follows three chameleons on a journey outside of their familiar environment, something that we ask our kids to do frequently. The book has the chameleons to change the color of their skin, differing facial expressions, and the actions to externally illustrate what's happening internally in the nervous system. So, a few things that Mama says throughout the book. She says, Seth, I wonder if chomping this bug will be enjoyable. Again, I wonder statement. Or, I notice your color is turning gold just in time to sit to eat. Now, these statements do several things. One, they model the language for internal states. So, this is huge for kids who struggle with identifying their emotions or what's going on inside their body. They also invite thinking and not just doing. And they can reduce the fight, flight, freeze response because they're not commands. It's less about control and more about co regulation. Now, this is a big shift from compliance to connection. And this is where it gets big for a lot of us. Whether we're parents or we're therapists or we're teachers, we've been trained to manage behavior. And often that looks like giving directions, setting expectations, and reinforcing these things. But as Bobbi Cook reminds us, true communication happens when we're attuned to those around us, when we pause, and when we see the child and not just their behavior. Declarative language can allow us to do all of that. It aligns beautifully with co-regulation and trauma-informed care. Instead of saying, stop yelling, we might say, I hear your voice is getting really loud. I wonder what's going on. Now you can hear still with my tone in that one. So what about even this? Instead of, again, stop yelling, you can say as calm as you can muster in the moment, I hear your voice is getting really loud and I'm really wondering what's going on, right? The way that our tone and what we choose to say can affect a person's response. And this shift can disarm defensiveness and open up the door for connection. Again, not just compliance. So, using these types of statements has been around in the fields of psychology and in therapy for a long time. I remember when I was in high school and learning in my peer counseling class, when you're saying, when you, I feel. So, I'm not really sure that I took into practice with this little sweet third grader that I knew and I got to go visit weekly, but I do remember being exposed to it. I also remember the free ice cream I got every time that I went to go visit this sweet little third grader. And later on, I remember discussing active listening with my husband. We were in this marital counseling class. It was a marriage seminar, and we were supposed to start with a open question of when you say, when you, and then whatever it is, and I feel. And then we're supposed to flip and respond to that by saying, oh, so you are saying, and then repeat whatever our perception is. My husband, who went first, said, sometimes when you drive, I feel scared. And I burst out laughing, kind of like I'm doing right now. And I had to repeat right back to him. So you're saying, when I drive, sometimes you feel scared. We looked around at the number of serious discussions going around near us, and we realized we were in the minority laughing at this concept. But I do also recognize that if he had just told me how to drive from the side seat, like I sometimes do to him, I'd be frustrated and likely offended. My daughter often feels this way when I'm sitting next to her. But that day, the connection disarmed me. And we still have a good laugh about it today. And isn't that the goal with our kids? To disarm them and to connect with them. So here's some tips for getting started. And let's get practical, okay? So here's 5 ways that you could start incorporating some declarative language into your home life. Number 1 is those I notice or I wonder statements. These phrases are gold. They remove judgment, they spark curiosity. Like, I noticed you walked away when we started math. I wonder if something about it feels tricky today. Okay. Another way would be to narrate your own thinking. Model problem solving by talking through your thoughts. So, I'm thinking we might need more time to finish this. So, maybe we shift it to tomorrow. Okay. Again, this is modeling your own thinking. Number 3 could be inviting shared attention. Oh, wow, look at this. This is interesting. This helps to build joint engagement, especially important for autistic kids. 4 could replace commands with observations. So instead of clean that up, it would be, I see the puzzle pieces are still out. What could we do about this? And number 5, most importantly, be patient with the process. This is a long game, and kids may not respond right away, but you're laying the groundwork for this flexible thinking and autonomy and independence. Now, here's some common challenges because I'm sure that you are thinking, all right, Sarah, how am I going to do this? Like, you gave me these strategies, but am I thinking about every word that I'm saying? And you might also be wondering, what if my kid doesn't respond? Or what if I need them to do something immediately? What if the environment doesn't allow this type of thinking because of social norms? These are all totally fair questions. And this is not an all or nothing. There are times when safety or structure demands more direct language. Stop, there's a car coming, right? That requires a quick response. But think of declarative language as your default and the imperative as an exception. You could even pair the two, declarative and imperative. So I'm thinking it's time to clean up now. Let's do it together. Okay? We pair both of them together. Another option, I notice it's really hard to stop playing. I'll help you to move the toys. And again, chameleon tail, Mama says, Sally, what is your body telling you? You may need to move, but because that's not easy to do in a cafe, let's try some interesting tastes and textures. Another option is a first then paired with an or. So I'm not meaning something like first you stop playing, then we leave, right? That is sure a sequence, but it's a commanding sequence. And they still have that second person subject. So they're absolutely demanding. Instead, you could say something like, we have about 15 minutes to leave. So what if first you put your shoes on and then we have time to eat a quick snack? Or you can keep playing for 2 more songs and put your shoes on right before we go. And we'll eat our snack in the car. Okay? So you, the parent, you're still making the snack. And your kiddo is still getting their shoes on, yet the autonomy is theirs. So this kind of support is called scaffolding. And in some cases, you're laying out expectations and boundaries because of time, and sometimes it's the environmental expectations. But both promote observation and ideas, which are key for kids who are still learning to regulate themselves. Hey listeners, we're going to take a quick break from our chat, but I have something super special to share with you. If you've been loving the stories and strategies that we talk about each week, you're going to want to check out our brand new book, co-authored by me and Jackie Adrian, called A Chameleon Tale, A Colorful Sensory Story. It's the perfect resource for anyone navigating the beautiful and sometimes challenging world of sensory needs and neurodiversity with their kiddos. Our book follows Sally and Seth, 2 adorable chameleons on their journey to the Chameleon Cafe, highlighting how every family member's sensory experience can be unique. Not only is it gorgeously illustrated by Jackie, seriously, these chameleons are so cute. But it's also designed as a meaningful conversation tool that you can use with your child to help them recognize and express what's going on inside their bodies. Imagine having a story that you can read together where your child can say, hey, I feel like Seth today. I need and then list one of the compensation strategies that Seth uses. And for parents, it's a way to give your children a language to talk about their feelings and their bodies. Plus, you'll find ideas for regulation strategies to try together. The book is available for order right now. Yes, right now. You can find A Chameleon Tale on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can request it at your favorite local bookstore or find it and its free book guide at homeschoolot.com/a-chameleon-tale. So support two mama authors, grow your family's emotional toolbox, and get a beautiful keepsake for your bookshelf. Order today and review it, and let's keep changing lives, one story at a time. Now, back to the episode. Welcome back. Now, for those of you who are thinking, I'm going to go into my child's room and only be thinking about the language that I'm using, and then their thought is going to be, great, what book has my mom been reading, or what class is she taking now? What podcast is she listening to? You might be right. So I wanted to be sure that I listened to the perspectives of some autistic kids and adults to talk about and see if this is actually what their perception is. So I started with a podcast by Christy Forbes. She is an autistic adult with PDA. Both stand for the persistent demand of avoidance or pervasive desire for autonomy, referring to the same autistic profile. She's also a parent of an autistic child. The podcast called In Tune Pathways, and I'll make sure it is also linked here for you in the show notes. Now, throughout the podcast, she discussed the need for authentic communication. She notes that both her and her children resist when they know that the purpose is just to get them to do something. And that actually isn't connection. Then, no matter what language you are using, the desire is still the same. It's obedience, it's not connection. So she talks about how confusing declarative language can also be. So, for example, instead of saying, pick up your shoes, if you're saying, I notice your shoes are in the middle of the floor. Oh, okay. Without that next step of, I'm wondering what we do about it, the person could either one, be confused, or two, be like, thanks for the information. This concept was further discussed in a few differing Substack articles that I read, also by autistic adults. So again, I'm going to link all of these in the show notes. And the articles reiterated the importance of context and the environment of who is talking. So if you've been in a role where you've historically been authoritarian and your goal has been obedience and compliance, the change in language isn't going to build that connection. It by itself is not going to make the difference. So you likely need to begin with the underlying why. Remember, again, our goal here is not compliance. Instead, it's leading our kids on a path where they are successful in what they specifically need and want to do during the day. So if we go back to this same shoe conversation again, in my house, I could say, if your shoes are in the middle of the floor, the dog's going to eat them, and I don't think you want that. Then could go on with, can you put them in the shoe holder downstairs or in your closet upstairs to protect them? Right? So it's based on what our environment is. When I start talking about how obedience and compliance aren't the goal, I sometimes get pushback from parents, most very well-meaning. Some saying, I'm the authority and it's my job to keep my kids safe. Yes. Another thought is kids have to learn to follow directions because people aren't going to walk on eggshells for them. Okay. And finally, a third, typically from Christian parents who have said, if I don't teach that there's an authority, how is my child going to understand that there's always an authority in their life? So to the first two, the answer is very similar to what the autistic authors were saying in both the podcast and the blogs. This is a long game. And when the goal is only compliance, that environment may not be successful now or for this hypothetical job that's in the future. And there are boundaries for safety and kindness to others. Yes, absolutely. You are the authority, but then the underlying why is easily explainable. The goal isn't obedience. The goal is safety. The goal isn't obedience. The goal is kindness to your friends. Now, the third, I want to be clear that Homeschool OT has clients from all different faith backgrounds. It's not lost on me that you choose to come here to me as a resource, and I'm really grateful for that. And in addition, I do not have any formal training in theology. But in these next 3 to 4 minutes, I'm going to take you through my process of combining faith with this specific topic. I can speak to this concern from a Christian perspective because I do share that faith. So, this is me coming alongside of you, sharing my processing while admitting that I absolutely do not have the perfect answer. But the past few mornings, I considered how to discuss this based in theology, and I went to the Bible. Now, initially, I thought I came in with this preconceived notion. I was like, I'm going to just be able to say how Jesus used declarative language, and it's a beautiful way to model his actions. So I literally opened Matthew with my paper in hand, and I was ready to diagram those sentences, right? Some so that I could show you the declarative language. But instead, I found 23 imperative statements in Matthew, just in chapters 3 through 6, and an additional 13 that would have been imperative, except they started with, I tell you. So I literally thought to myself, oh, crap, now what? So I prayed about it. I thought about it for the rest of that day. The next morning, I was like, you know what? Here's another idea. I'm going to check some of the other gospels because maybe the key here is that different people's perceptions of Jesus. So I read through Luke and Mark, specifically the story of the bleeding woman. Matthew 9:22, Jesus said, "Take heart, daughter, your faith has healed you." Imperative, take heart. In Luke 8:48, it was, "Daughter, your faith has healed you." Whew, declarative. Okay, so I thought, all right, maybe I'm onto something here. But then in Mark 5:14, it was, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from suffering." This is declarative and imperative. So I'm not really onto something there. Jesus was speaking, and a change in the listener's perspective or in the reporter's semantics didn't make him any less authoritative there. So just when I was thinking, maybe I shouldn't actually be talking about this or teaching this, and I was reminded of the concern of Christy from the podcast. And she said, if we're thinking of this strategy just to get our kids to comply, then we're missing the point. The purpose of Jesus's teaching isn't to force us into compliance or to lay out a list of rules for success in life. Instead, we do have free will, and the desire is a relationship. Throughout the gospel, Jesus uses imperative, declarative, interrogative, and exclamatory. He uses narrative stories and he leads by example. He changes based on the people that he's talking to and what environment that he's in. His goal is the relationship with us. So the key takeaway here from our researchers, our autistic voices, and my own faith-based commentary is that we want to use declarative language as a tool to further our connection with our children, not to manipulate them. I feel like this is a big episode. It's not as simple as this idea and then how we can use it. Instead, we really dove into some of the nuance. Declarative language is not a magic wand, but it is a powerful tool. It changes how we show up in relationship with our kids. It invites collaboration, reflection, and agency. As Linda Murphy writes, declarative language provides the glue for social connection. And Bobbi Cook, in her book, Communicating with Compassion, she said, compassionate communication isn't soft, it's skillful. It requires intention, awareness, and practice. So this week, I invite you to experiment. Shift a few commands into invitations. Narrate your thoughts, wonder aloud, and most importantly, notice how your child responds. Because when we change our language, we change the interaction, and over time, we can change that relationship. Thanks for spending time with me here on the OT is In. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with a colleague, a friend, or another parent who could use a little more connection in their day. And don't forget to subscribe and to leave a review. It really helps for others to find this podcast. So until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and remember, homeschooling is not alone schooling because the OT is in. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The OT is In. I hope our discussion has provided valuable insights and support for your educational journey. Remember, as parents, it's essential to address our children's diverse learning and developmental needs. And here at Homeschool OT, we asked you, the parents, the most helpful way for us to support you. And the majority of you answered, time to ask questions so you can stop being overwhelmed with the noise of all these varying suggestions, some often contradicting themselves. So if you are seeking personalized guidance, Homeschool OT now offers concierge services tailored to your family's unique requirements. You can book 1 session, 4 sessions, 12, 24, whatever. It's all on demand so that you can ask the questions and receive practical strategies, heartfelt encouragement to empower your homeschool experience. So to learn more about how Homeschool OT can support you, visit the services page at homeschoolot.com. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to having you with us on the next episode of The OT is In.